and welcome to the Kaiju Clash Podcast about all things Godzilla, Gamera, Toho, and much more. We have a special treat for you here today, folks. The debut episode. Holy crap. Due dates are closer than they appear. So, for those of you who don't know who I am Parker from the 00 Wrestling Review, and I am an experienced podcaster, and I am a lifelong kaiju fan. I like Godzilla, I like podcasting, so why not put them together? And I just did. So before we go in depth into anything, I'd like to give a few shout outs. First to the 00 Wrestling Review, that's the podcast that I also work for, and I have a link to them on my website at kaiju-clash-podcast.com. It's near the bottom. You can find it there. And we also have Alex String. He is an independent game designer, and he needs your help. Go to website, again, kaiju-clash-podcast.com. You'll find Help Support Alex String. If you click on that, that will send you to a link to his Patreon page. You can make $3, $6, $10, $15, or $20 pledges. Go check it out. I highly recommend that you do. I did myself. He looks pretty cool. The games look really cool, and I can't wait for him to come out with the next big thing. So, let's start with some feedback. We had a lot of feedback this week. However, I'm going to be reading a lot of it later on, but the non-topic feedback came from Rick from the 00 Wrestling Review. He said, as a lifelong Toho fan like myself, it's great to see this podcast start up. I can't wait for the first episode. Well, neither can I, Rick, and guess what? It's happening. So, I'll explain this week's topic. Simple. How did you get into Godzilla? Every Godzilla fan, every kaiju fan, every fan of some monster movie has a beginning. I have mine, you have yours. You wrote into me, and I'll read your story. First one coming from Ryan, and he says, I've always been obsessed with dinosaurs as my parents could not afford cable growing up. I watched a lot of local channels. On the weekends, there used to be a midnight matinee, usually hosted by Elvra. Many of those were 50s and 60s monster movies. I was hooked from the first monster marathon at 3 years old. Nice. Second one. Renee, I've always liked dinosaurs. My dad got me into King Kong at first when he brought home King Kong vs. Godzilla, and there it was from there. Went from toys, posters, comics, and movies, and maybe a tattoo if I can find the right artist. Well, guess what? I want a tattoo too. I'm gonna get one of those. I'm gonna get the Final Wars movie poster. I'm gonna put that on my back. I'm gonna get the 1984 movie poster. I'm going to plaster that on my chest. I don't know what I'm going to put on my butt. If you have any suggestions, please write into the show, kaiju-clash-podcast.com. I might have a Godzilla head on my penis, so when I pee, it makes oh my god, makes it look like it's breathing fire when really it's just my pee. So on to dirty subjects, to more feedback from Perry. I've always been interested in dinosaurs. King Kong vs. Godzilla was showing on TV, and since then I've always been into monster films, and I cannot wait to see this. I never heard of Godzilla, so didn't know anything about him, and the scene when he breaks out from the iceberg surprised me so much. He turned out to be a dinosaur. Wow. Next one from Jade. Like everyone else's story, I also like dinosaurs. It started with Jurassic Park and that weird animated kids series, We're Back. One morning at my daycare when I was about 6 or 7, there was a movie playing on the television that they had set up for us kiddos to watch before they would take us to school. I remember thinking it was very bizarre, but kept watching because I occasionally kept seeing a big dinosaur. I never got to finish the flick because I had to leave for school, and it wasn't until I really got into Godzilla in high school that I realized I had been watching Godzilla vs. Hedorah. Please excuse my stuttering. The rest is pretty much history. I work in the video store these days, so technically I get paid to talk about Godzilla movies all day. Life is pretty good. And guess what, Jade? I agree. Next, Brent. When I was 3 or 4, my first film was Godzilla King of the Monsters. From then to now, at age 20, has never gone away. I mean, how can you go wrong with a mutated dinosaur born out of the atomic age, wreaking vengeance against humanity and facing off against other enemies, plus practical effects give it its charm and affection. And guess what, Brent? I also agree with you. You and Jade should run for president. Leo, when I was about 3 years old, my neighbor was babysitting me for a while excuse me for that, while my mother was out doing some errands, and he brought movies to keep me entertained. Among them was King Kong vs. Godzilla, my first introduction to the giant monster genre, and I fell absolutely in love with it. From then on, I spent my childhood hunting down the films and devoutly watching them. My fascination with them hasn't changed since. I don't know where my old neighbor is in the world now, but I wish him the best, and I am forever grateful for introducing me to this wonderful series. Next, Kyron. When I was about 5 or 6, my favorite movie was TriStar's infamous Godzilla adaptation. For all of the movie's failings, it was introduced to me that the concept of Godzilla, so I have a bit of a soft spot for it. I lost interest for a long time until I was about 13. I happened upon GMK playing on Sci-Fi Channel. Remember Sci-Fi? Now it's Sci-Fi, and I hate it. She spelled it at first with the I and then with the Y. Gee, I wonder why. Fast forward to 2009, I'm 15 years old, and I have a casual interest in Godzilla. I happened upon Cinemassacre's Godzilla-thon on YouTube, and I watched the entire playlist after I started watching the series when they played, and wasn't too long until I was hooked. Next, Kane. When I was young, I came across a Sci-Fi Channel, hope I spelt that right. They had a Godzilla marathon, and after that I got Godzilla King of the Monsters for Christmas last year with Rodan, Godzilla vs. Mothra Terra, Mechagodzilla, and Godzilla's Revenge. Since then, I collected them all and became a fan and loved Godzilla ever since. Next, from Mario. When I was a kid, my first movie was Godzilla in 1998 VHS that my mom and dad bought me. I really liked that film, and I didn't even want to go to church so I could watch this film. When they killed Godzilla, I cried every time. I never wanted such an amazing creature like him, even if it was fictional, to die. In that moment, Kaijus became a great part of me. Then I started watching the original Godzilla. Is a great part of my childhood that I'll never forget. The Godzilla 2014 movie brought tears to my eyes. My first Godzilla movie I saw in the movie theater, bringing back childhood memories. I enjoy the most to watch a Godzilla movie with my little brother. Until the day, he's the only Godzilla fan I know in person. Godzilla inspired me to never give up, even if the world is against me. I'll never stop being a Godzilla fan. And he attached a Final Wars Godzilla picture with it. Well, guess what, Mario? I agree. I also agree. Godzilla is a huge inspiration for everyone. Next, Donnie. It was Ian Thorne's Crestwood Godzilla book that drew me into the series. Back in the very early grade school years, this would have been in the early 90s, I struggled with math with my school teacher aunt would tutor me after school. After I'd solve everything in her satisfaction, she would let me read the Crestwood Monster series. The school had a surplus of them, either from donation or they'd been there since 77, 78, and it somehow was all in her classroom on the bookshelf, which led me to a lifelong love for Godzilla, King Kong, Wolfman, Dracula, etc. I loved all the series, but Godzilla was the one that I returned to most often because it had the best characters, the best stories, the film synopsis, and the coolest pictures. I watched Godzilla 1985 in the spring or summer 1993, followed by Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 74. I have been hooked ever since. Next, from Chris. I got into Godzilla when I was only 4. My first movie was Godzilla in 1984. I watched it and I was in love with how powerful Godzilla was. After I watched them come on Sci-Fi Channel when they had their monster madness going on, Godzilla is my hero and will always be the king of all monsters. I liked how Godzilla was a force of good and evil when it was called for. Long live the king. I agree. He attached a picture of a 1995 burning Godzilla from Godzilla vs. Destroyer. Next, Levi. I was around 3, 4 years old. I was really into dinosaurs and things of that nature when my dad showed me the very first Godzilla series on the Sci-Fi Channel, which was Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. He was in the Godzilla as a kid too. He grew up in the 60s, and I remember watching the fight scene, and of course I loved it. Seeing a gigantic dinosaur-like creature had an awesome, uniquely shaped spines on his back with a call and unique roar that shot not red but blue fire from his mouth, and then seeing an equally awesome dragon that flew and shot red fire from his mouth, seeing the engage in the battle. And then he told me that's Godzilla. Something snapped and I instantly fell in love. The rest is history. So what's my story? Well, guess what? I'm going to tell you my story. The story begins all the way back to the 70s where the hippies, the afros, and all the weeds thrived. My father grew up a huge Godzilla fan and passed it to me when I grew up. I was just like every other little kid growing up. Puke everywhere, crap my pants, make loud obnoxious noises in the middle of the night. I'm sure my parents really appreciated that a lot. So my parents alternated as to who makes me shut up in the night. And whenever it was my dad's turn, he would always shove a Godzilla VHS tape in the VHS machine, and he would fall asleep on the couch while I watched the movie from his lap. It's hard to say what movie it was because, well, one, I didn't have a memory then, and two, there were a few that we had back then. The only ones you really had were Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, Godzilla vs. Megalon, Godzilla's Revenge, Godzilla vs. King Kong, or Invasion of the Astro Monsters. Those were the only VHS films, even with DVD, that we had at the time. So I subconsciously fell in love with Godzilla, and it was technically a brainwashing, but it was a good brainwashing. After I grew up and developed a memory, I would constantly watch Godzilla VHS tapes over and over and over again. It was a miracle that the VHS tapes themselves wouldn't melt into a goo. But at some point, I found out that other Godzilla movies existed, and I wanted them. So when I found out that these movies, other Godzilla movies existed, my mind pretty much just... I remember when Netflix, they had DVD rentals. DVD rentals. That goes a long way back. And I found a plethora of Godzilla movies there. I remember my mom would always rent them, and then they would come, and then I would watch them, and at the end of the day, my dad would take the movies, and he may or may not have made another DVD copy. Shh, I didn't say that, but he may have made another copy, and that's why I have so many Godzilla movies. Shh. So after that part of the story, I'll get back and finish my story, but how about we go to some other feedback? First, from Tyler. I was 4. I was growing up with my grandparents, and I liked dinosaurs and dragons and things that cause destruction. And one day my grandfather was watching sci-fi, and my first Godzilla movie I saw was Godzilla Destroy All Monsters. And I saw all the monsters, and seeing all the monsters and the king himself, along with, to me, the number one contender, King Ghidorah. Next, David. The early 70s, a young single mom, me, her very hyperactive 2-year-old son. A very busy day for her cleaning the apartment. She turns the channel knob on the TV trying to find something to watch as she works. Me, I'm just doing my thing, bouncing off the walls. Then I hear the iconic roar for the first time. I look on the TV and I see a dinosaur blow up a ship with a fire breath and following a flying creature. I'm captivated. Then my mother changes the channel, prompting me to cry, "No! Back!" She puts it back. For the first time in my life, I actually sat still as I watched the rest of Ghidorah the three-headed monster, instantly making me a lifelong G fan and enabling my mom to complete all her housework without needing to wrangle me every 3 seconds. She finished in no time. So from then on, always put those films on. She always put those films on for when she found them on TV. Little did she know she was creating a monster. So if you want advice for all you parents out there, if you want your kids to settle down, show them Godzilla. It helps. Next, Derek. I was always a dinosaur fan as a little kid. Then I was exposed to a combination of after-school specials and Saturday afternoon movies, which I'd had a good chunk of Godzilla and Gamera in my local station KTVU, and had Captain Cosmic, Bob Wilkins of Creature Features, in the superhero outfit with his faithful robot 2T2 that every other day after school showed a steady rotating stream of Godzilla, Gamera, Ultraman, Space Giant, Spectrum-Man, and Johnny Soko. So for years, my already giant lizard-loving self had a constant kaiju diet. Next story is from Duncan. My dad showed it to me when I was 2 years old, and I've been obsessed with it ever since, and I've only loved it more and more over the years. That reminds me, I think I forgot to do something in the beginning of the podcast. Alex Strang, I think I already mentioned him. My short-term memory loss. I forget if I did, but if I didn't, Alex Strang, Kaiju Clash Podcast.com, help support Alex Strang. You click on that, it'll send you to his Patreon page, $3, $6, $10, $15, and $20 pledges. But also, Duncan, if you go to our website, KaijuClashPodcast.com, you go under Kaiju Battle Stories. Duncan is the author of those stories that you see, the great stories there. He writes stories about fantasy battles that you've always wanted to watch. For example, up on the website right now is Baragon versus Megaguirus and Mechagodzilla versus Gigan. He's got 2 stories up on the website so far. And I want to thank him for letting me put his stories on there. I highly recommend, if you have free time and if you're bored, just check it out and read them. It's not gonna hurt. You'll be entertained and your brain will be fed knowledge. So on to that, we get to a story from GJ. I recall it being the summer between the 1st and 2nd grade. I could do the math about my age, but at least I remember that much for certain. Even at a young age, I was a night owl. My mom would normally stay up past midnight watching movies in the living room, and if it wasn't something I was interested in, I would go in the kitchen. Around 1 a.m., I decided to grab a snack for myself and flip channels on the TV. As I did, I passed by a strange image. It looked like a giant creature. I flipped back. This immediately realistic interpretation of a dinosaur was battling a 3-headed dragon and another creature with a red visor and hooks for arms. I would later discover the title of that film was Godzilla vs. Gigan. I believe my exact words out loud, dead serious, were, "Oh, this must be Godzilla. Looks kind of fake." Of course, not understanding the context of the effects at the time, but it's kind of cool, I finished, and that was it. I was hooked on this battle amongst 3 titans. As commercial breaks came in, I realized the Sci-Fi Channel was doing a week-long theme of Godzilla movies called Godzilla Inc. There were only 2 days left. The next day was Godzilla vs. Megalon, which I was less thrilled by. But the final day gave me Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. And of course, I ate that one up. Wanting more, my dad took me to the now ancient history Zandu rental store. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. And grabbed Godzilla in 1985 for me. Boy, times were simpler back when you could just grab a Godzilla in 1985 out of a rental store. Now you gotta pay an arm and a leg on eBay for it. Although I was confused why this Godzilla wasn't a hero, I enjoyed it regardless. The Sci-Fi Channel's Godzilla Inc. week also heavily advertised the Treadmasters toy line. After watching these 4 films, I knew I had to get myself a Godzilla toy. My allowance was $5 a week, and I saved up for a month to get one. The rest is, as they say, history. I would learn more about the series as I grew each year, and I'm more in love with it today than ever. My Treadmasters Godzilla figure is currently sitting on my shelf. Nice. Last bit of feedback is from Lloyd. He says, the year was 1956 and I had seen Them, the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and of course the 1952 re-release of the 1933 King Kong with the 1949 Mighty Joe Young, and was into giant monsters. I had seen the 1956 documentary Animal World with a 10-minute dinosaur segment by Willis O'Brien and Ray Harryhausen when Godzilla King of the Monsters came out, and I of course went to see it expecting another Monster on the Loose movie, which is what I looked upon at the time. Then later that year I saw a screenplay by Willis O'Brien, The Beast from Hollow Mountain. I forgot Godzilla King of the Monsters until it showed up on Los Angeles TV around mid-1958. Then it happened in early 1959. A movie called Gigantus the Fire Monster came out. Like a lot of other fans of famous monsters of filmland, I wrote asking if Gigantus wasn't really the sequel to Godzilla King of the Monsters. That's when we discovered there really was a movie from 1954 called Gojira and a 1955 film called Counterattack of Godzilla. I saw both at the Newark Theater in Santa Monica, and their uncut Japanese version was hooked on Toho. You must remember I had also seen both Rodan and the Mysterians prior to 1959, along with the H-Man, so I was already attuned to Toho. I reaffirmed Godzilla the week in 1962. The American re-edit of King Kong vs. Godzilla came out by seeing that version on Saturday and going to the Toho LA Bray Sunday for the original Japanese version. So that's the feedback that we got this week. Thank you all who wrote in, and I greatly appreciate it. So I'm gonna go right back into my story. Back to the story. So I had the movies and the figures. I loved the collection, but then sometime in 6th or 7th grade, I had a somewhat identity crisis. I thought I outgrew Godzilla and packed my collection up in boxes and sent them to the attic. I remember seeing my dad watch the empty shelves with an eternal tear. It was about 3-4 years later after that. Godzilla 14 came out when I was in 9th grade. The weeks before the movie released, I unboxed my video box. I pulled out some Godzilla flicks, and I just watched them. I never realized how much I missed them. Slowly, the boxes started coming one by one, and the unboxing began. The shelves were stocked, and I remember in 10th grade getting a 1994 Godzilla figure from my brother for Christmas. After that, I realized I had to do what I had to do, and I had to become who I truly am. I'm Parker. I'm an experienced podcaster, credible journalist, and kaiju enthusiast. Save the BS for later. I've done things I want to do. I made a podcast. I started a Godzilla marathon this summer, front to back. I finished my Godzilla movie collection, and guess what? I started a podcast. You know why? I felt like it. I'm at the point where I can't hear you because my fans are just too loud. I don't know how good this episode will be. It'll probably be great, but I can guarantee you that if you listen to the first episode, you just began watching the podcast that will send shockwaves through the world in the long-term future. I appreciate, and I thank anyone who's listening right now, and I hope you join me for the time of our lives. Yeah, I said it. It's going to be the time of our lives. You know, I've started I know this is not a wrestling podcast, but about a year and a half ago, I started watching wrestling with my dad, and I never thought I would start a podcast. I never thought I would be a journalist. I never thought I'd be a public figure. I was just an average, ordinary citizen, never thought much about myself, but, you know, I've decided to take a risk. It wasn't really much of a risk. I didn't have much to lose over it, but I tried. I wanted to start. My dream was to start a podcast with my dad, and to be by each other's sides for, I don't know, for however long this lasts. You know, this was my dream. To be a podcaster, to start a podcast, and guess what? 6 months ago, I did it. I said, why not? We helped each other, and we made our dream come true. You know, we're not that big. We're not big at all. We We get 3 to 5 views on YouTube every week. We get about 30 listens on Spreaker a week. I mean, that's pretty good for Spreaker, but I mean, so far this last month, I don't want to brag because, when you brag, it just comes right back in your face just like karma, but we had 4,000 hits. People listen. People care to what I want to talk about. And I decided, well, hey, I like Godzilla. Why not make a podcast about it? And guess what? I did because I felt like it. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it. You're not too young. You're not too old. Do what you want to do. You only have one life, one shot, and you're not gonna make it up if you fail. And guess what? Sometimes you take a risk, and sometimes you have nothing to lose. But I'm not gonna sit here while people tell me I can't. I'm not that big. I don't have that many trolls. I don't even have any trolls at all. But guess what? For anyone in the future who thinks I can't, guess what? I can, and I just did. Don't let anyone tell you can't do anything. You do whatever is in your power. If you have a dream and you have the determination and the will, it will happen. I guarantee it. No matter what that dream is, it will happen if you believe it. So for the 10,000th time, don't let people tell you can or you can. This is not just the start of a podcast. This isn't the start of a franchise. This is a start of a revolution, and it's gonna shock the world. And that is my story. So if you listen, or if you choose to listen, and if you choose to listen on a regular basis, you're not just supporting an indie guy. You're not just supporting a small town person. You're participating in the revolution that's gonna come. So before I blow a motivational gasket, how about I start some kaiju news? Yeah, amp up. So, to begin, Toho's Parasite Part 1 on Australian DVD and Blu-ray in November. The Australian label Madman Entertainment will release the live-action movie Parasite Part 1 on Region 4 DVD and Blu-ray November 18th, 2015. No North American release has been announced. So this is going to be only available in Australia. So once November comes around and this movie comes out, I mean, it's not like you're not going to find it on eBay, but for those Australians or people who have enough money to buy it through eBay and you want to know what it's about tiny creatures called parasites that have arrived on Earth with the sole purpose of taking over human bodies and preying on mankind. One such parasite latches onto an ordinary high school student, Shishinsky Izumi. Sorry for butchering that. Unfortunately, he is able to fight it off before it reaches his brain, but unfortunately, it is now stuck within his right hand. So if you're at all interested in this, if you've ever seen it, write to the show, kaiju-clash-podcast.com, and tell me if it's any good, because for deathcore kaiju fans, this might be something that'll interest you. Next, videos of Godzilla 2016 filming are out. The filming has officially begun. So what are the videos of? It's they're showing a filming of the stereotypical everyone's running through the city screaming Godzilla, Godzilla, ah, and that's what they're filming. Next, Bryan Cranston says what Godzilla did wrong. During the Nerdist podcast, Bryan Cranston discussed an issue he had with the movie regarding his movie death. That character dying at the time was a mistake. It was a mistake. I knew it when I read it. When I read it, I said, "Oh, page 50. This character, who is the emotional core, the center of what's guiding the story up to that point? He dies. What a waste." And they kind of dealt with it poorly. I'll be honest when I say I just watched Godzilla 2014 for the Godzilla. I mean, yeah, plotline is everything. So are the actors. I'm not much of an actor analysis. I'm not much of a movie plot analysis. But if you get Godzilla into the town, destroying things, beating up monsters, and I'm gonna go rah rah rah. So that's my opinion. Next, Funko unveils their new Godzilla pop vinyl figure at the GameStop Expo. The long teased and surely long dreamt of by fans of Godzilla pop vinyl figure have been revealed to the world. Figures are set to release in November. It's hard to explain what a pop figure is. I only knew what those things were about a week ago when I was looking for news. So, for those of you who are just dying to know or who are curious and who are too lazy to Google pop figure, you can Google the Kaiju Clash Podcast. Go to www.kaijuklashdpodcast.com, and I'm gonna in the next few. It should be out by I don't know. In the next few days, I'll put a picture in there on the website on our homepage, so you know what one of those looks like, and I'll put a picture of the Godzilla one that's gonna be coming out soon. Next, Godzilla 2016 name released. Gumaru Island is picking up Japanese news outlets reporting that the shot is happening at the Kamada Railway Station in Tokyo. One in particular reports a flyer with instructions on how to reach the location. Said flyer seems to indicate the film's working title is Shin Gojira, roughly translated to New Godzilla or True Godzilla. It's unlikely this is the actual title of the film. Those who followed Godzilla Final Wars in 2004 may recall that the working title for the movie was The Godzilla. I'm sure Toho and director-writer Hideki Anno, I feel like I didn't butcher that one too bad, but if I did, I'm sorry, will come up with something more fitting. I don't care what the title is, I just want to see Godzilla. So, next after that, Godzilla 2016 to feature both CGI and suitmation. Yes, according to the article by ABC News, recently co-director Shinji Hijushi. I did a good job on that one, I feel, but if I didn't, I'm sorry once again. Talked about Godzilla 2016, and he gave confirmation that the new film will be a combination of both classic tokusatsu and I feel I butchered that one though, and CGI. Now, what's better, CGI or suitmation? I'm gonna give my short opinion right here, right now. I'd rather suitmation. I'm not a big fan of CGI. I don't like CGI. I think I'm gonna put that as a topic of one of the episodes in the near future. Next, this is interesting. 5 Toho monsters that should be utilized in the sequel to 2014 Godzilla. So, I don't have the name of the website that did the article. I'm sorry, but the guy who made the article pretty much made a top 5 list of monsters he wants to see in Godzilla 2. Now, in Godzilla 2, it's already been confirmed. King Ghidorah, Mothra, Rodan, and well, obviously Godzilla. So. He's got 2 of those guys on the list here. Number 5, Gigan. Number 4, Destroyer. Number 3, Rodan. Number 2, Mechagodzilla. Number 1, King Ghidorah. It would be pretty cool to see Mechagodzilla come back for one of the 2 new ones in 2016 or 2018. But once again, I'm in it for the Godzilla and the monsters, so that kind of gives my opinion. Next, the last bit of news: Godzilla vs. King Kong remake possibility. This is not speculation. The fact that Skull Island, I think, is the name of the new King Kong film, is coming out 2017, while Godzilla 2 is coming out 2018. So there's speculation that they're gonna pair them 2 up and make a movie with them. As the 3rd installment. So, first of all, Godzilla in the 2014 movie, he pretty much hovered over skyscrapers, like he could see right through them. While King Kong, he wasn't even like an eighth of the size of a building, so obvious size disadvantage, and I'm gonna talk about that more in a minute. But King Kong, my opinion of I've never really, I don't want to say I don't like King Kong, but he's just never had a click with me. And I like all Godzilla movies. My main philosophy is they're all good in their own way. However, if I was to say which one I'm least excited about, it's probably Godzilla vs. King Kong in 1962. So I'm not sure how hot I'd be for a King Kong Godzilla remake, especially with when King Kong's gotta grow 1,000 times his size to even be comparable to Godzilla. So that was the news. This is the news that was the news, and it's not news because now you know it. Copyrighted by Richard Onisick and the Double O Wrestling Review. So, before we leave the show, I want to mention a schedule we have here. Geez, there's so many notes here. Alright, here we go. Here's the schedule. No, that's not the schedule. Ooh. Well, there is a schedule somewhere here. And it's about the upcoming events. Oh, is this it? Yeah. No. Alright, good thing I remember it. So next week, what are we talking about? Next week, we're talking about, is bigger really better, monster-wise? What do I mean by that? Is it such a good thing that Godzilla's as tall as he is today? Or should he shrink in size to more back in the Showa or Heisei days? Is it, do you think it's better to ration the monsters up more? Do you think it's just a good idea in general to have bigger monsters? I have my opinion. I'll give it next week. People who want to write into the show, kaijuklasspodcast.com, take a side and explain your position. I'm interested to hear what you think about that. That is September 26th, is bigger, really better, monster-wise. What's going to be going on after that? That is October 3rd, I believe, is going to be the third installment of the Kaiju Clash Podcast, the Revolution podcast, as I mentioned before. The next topic is Kaiju video games. You know, the Godzilla Save the Earth, Destroy All Monsters, Melee, Godzilla Unleashed, games like that. We're going to be talking about that. And maybe, does Gamera even have a video game? Like, I'm not sure. Someone's going to have to tell me if he is or not. The week after that, October 10th, that is our first ever movie review viewer's choice. Right into the show, I'm going to be asking the crowd, what do you want me to review? And the most answers we get is what we're going to review. Same thing as next week. That's going to be the October 17th, and that's a monster review. Pick a monster, any monster, and I'm going to review it. I'm going to give my opinion. I'm going to ask you on your opinion on the monster. And that's all. That's as far as I have planned. And there was something else. I just had it. Oh, where was it? I remember. Our YouTube page is Kaiju Clash Podcast, and I have 2 upcoming videos. A video game Godzilla unboxing video, and that's going to be coming out really soon. I haven't made it yet. I've been really busy, but when the first chance I get, I'm going to make it. And I also have a camera situation here. I'm not sure what camera I should use when, so once we get that figured out, I'm going to be making an unboxing video with a video game Godzilla. I'm going to be reviewing that figure. Also, I'm going to be reviewing the Geos figure from the Showa Geos. I got one of those figures. I'm going to be unboxing that and reviewing that, so be on the lookout for that. So thank you, everyone who participated. Thank you, everyone who made it to the end. Thank you, everyone who wrote into the show but couldn't get it read because there's just so much. We are on Facebook, Kaiju Clash Podcast. We are also on Twitter, Kaiju Revolution, Facebook, Kaiju Clash Podcast, and we are also on Stitcher, Spreaker. I'm not sure if I'm on iTunes yet. I don't think I was approved yet, but I will be. So look out for that. Thank you all. See you all next week. Can't wait.